Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, we're going to be talking about the talent Templar Strikes and why it's not used in like mainstream or for most DPS and stuff like that. Now, this is a question I get all the time. That's what made me think about doing the video, right? I get questions about what's about Templar Strikes. Is Templar Strikes good yet? Is Templar Strikes good with Herald? Is Templar Strikes good with this or that? I get it all the time, and if I'm getting it that much on my little old channel, then I have to project that out to the entire rec community, and I have to think that this talent is loved or intriguing to a very large portion of the rep paladin community. So we're going to talk about it, why it's not like advantageous to use this talent, and maybe some solutions to that or whatever, but we're going to explore all that in this video. Now, before we get fully into it, I have already done a video. I'm not going to drone on about it, but I've already done a video about making the Ret Guild. I did a post about it as well. Something I didn't realize until I had two people apply this way earlier, a little bit before this video, is you can actually go to like the guild thing, guild and communities, and you can search. So you can just search for required retribution and apply, and then I can just accept you whenever. So that's an easy way you can join, and I already set up a Discord as well for it, that you can then join the Discord once you join the guild. So just search for Retribution Required in the search bar and join on an alt or main paladin. Just has to be a paladin, and that's it. So let's go ahead and talk more about Templar Strikes here. So I was actually doing some testing with this. Because, again, I get this question all the time. Like, probably, I don't know. I don't read every single comment, but I try, my channel is small enough that I can try to read all of them. And I probably, per tier, I don't know, 10 plus questions about Templar Strikes per tier, and maybe even more than that, especially on the actual Ret Guide video, which gets a lot more views. I definitely can't read all those comments necessarily, so it might even be more than that, but let's just say 10 to 20 per tier questions about Templar Strikes. And so that was, and when I get those questions, I'm like, yeah, let's test it out, and I'll randomly test it out and see that, okay, yeah, it's just not as good, whatever. But let's talk about why that is. So the choice here is actually a 3 choice. It looks like a 2 choice, Crusading Strike auto attack or Templar Strikes, but you can also just not choose it, and then you use your regular Crusader Strike, which is also an interesting button. And there's been times where that is actually the better button to use for AoE, but Crusading Strike auto attack, mostly has been the play. There was a little bit of time for Templar Strikes, and there's a little bit of time when it was completely busted as well. But that has kind of gone by the wayside. There also was a tier, at least one tier in Dragonflight towards the end of it, where Templar Strikes was usable on some bosses. But here's the problem. Even in that iteration with that tuning, you had to play basically perfectly with Templar Strikes, which does take a little bit of perfection to use, because technically, you don't want to be spamming it when it's tuned correctly, and you want to make sure you're using your better generator first, maybe even in between casts. So let's say you use the first strike, you might still want to judge or reapply your expurgation with your Blade of Justice before you use the second part of your strike, the slash. And so it takes a little bit to perfect it. But even if you were playing it perfectly, it was basically just kind of equal or slightly ahead of Crusading Strike auto attack. And that takes obviously no effort. You just have to be in melee range and be auto attacking, right? And so when something takes effort and the other thing in its node takes no effort, and the damage is similar, then most people are going to take the one that takes littler effort, because that's just another thing you have to focus on to do more damage. Now, and frankly, I think a lot of Ret Paladins, a lot of players in general, like the idea of doing something like Templar Strikes and having something else to perfect. But if the damage gain isn't enough, then it's not worth it, right? So most people don't want to play the hardest possible things and then not get any reward from it, would be kind of like my summary there. So actually testing out. So why is it actually so bad? So first of all, Crusading Strikes, it's automatic, it's passive, it's just auto attack. That means that while you're auto attacking, you get to press other buttons, right? So you get to press your generator of Blade of Justice or Judgment or Hammer of Wrath, and when you need to use that, which is not as much these days, but you have these other generators to press. And the biggest issue becomes is that the Crusading Strike auto attack DPS plus any other generator is more DPS than Templar Strikes, right? And so when so just by pressing Hammer of Wrath or pressing Blade of Justice while you have your Crusading Strikes going on, that's going to be more DPS than using your Templar Strikes, which is then taking away globals from your other abilities. So when this was kind of busted in a way, because at one point, and I know I found this out, I think before most people did, at one point, I can't remember exactly when it was, but you could literally just sit and spam Templar Strikes and not press any other button and do tons of damage. And it was actually kind of funny and cool. And now that we have the one button rotation, right, it doesn't seem that far-fetched. But, you know, it was busted. And why is that? That's because it did so much damage relative to the other things. So this was the only spender you would press because, first of all, you could spam it forever. Like, it didn't have any CD whatsoever. You could spam it forever. And you would just only spam that because it did so much damage, and then you'd use your spenders or whatever. Or, yeah, this would be the only generator, and then you'd use your spenders. And the problem is, as you tune it, it kind of needs to be that way. Because it's not, it does apply a dot to the target too, so you do want to keep the dot up technically on your target. But like, Exburg is a big source of damage. You need to keep that up on your target. Blade of Justice also does a decent part of your damage. Judgment does a decent part of your damage, plus it can proc High Lord's Judgment, plus it puts the debuff on the enemy that makes them take more from your spenders. So there's multiple reasons to press Judgment. Whereas to press Crusade or to press Templar Strikes, you're only pressing Templar Strikes to generate Holy Power. And that's it, right? That's the only real reason. It does put a dot up, which is a significant, well, fairly significant dot. But so let's say we tune that damage up, you are going to become to a point where, okay, well, this is the best thing to press, and so I'm going to press it all the time. And then so you increase the cooldown of it, so then it becomes like a mini cooldown, right? So if it does a ton of damage, it has a 10-second cooldown, then you have like this weird 10-second CD thing that you just put into your execution sentence or whatever, right? And it just becomes this weird thing that I think that they've kind of boxed themselves into here. And I think based on some of the more recent changes, because I believe in the most recent change they only buffed Crusading Strike auto attack damage, and they didn't touch Crusading Strike or Templar Strikes, unless I read that wrong in the buff that I actually missed, and I still apologize for that. I think they only buff this, so I think this is kind of the way they're going looking forward, is this, and then maybe this just being a talent on its own. And I don't know where Templar Strikes fits in, because I do like Templar Strikes. And so when we get talking about solutions, right, the only thing I can come up with is like, and this kind of speaks to WoW gameplay as a whole, right? I think sometimes you just have to double down on what's fun. So it was actually kind of fun just spamming Templar Strikes when it was broken. So maybe for one tier, right, you have your tier set, amplify the damage of Templar Strikes by like a ton of damage or something like that randomly, and it kind of forces you to take the talent, but it's kind of fun. And so you just sit there and spam Templar Strikes or something like that, right? And you could do the same thing with other abilities too. You could do it with your Blade of Justice, you could do it with Judgment, make it so that you would want to take like Judgment of the Justice or something like that, to where like it, you know, amplified it by so much that doing an extra 10% or whatever was so much that you would want to take that talent too, and just put everything into Judgments, right? Make it so like the first cast of your Divine Toll does so much damage that you actually want to take Quickened Invocation and have the cooldown reduced by 15 seconds. So even though it won't fit into your stuff anymore, it just does so much damage that you take that. Those are things that I could think they could maybe do to get something like Templar Strikes more play. Because otherwise, if you tune it correctly, right, if you tune it so it's on par with Crusading Strikes, everyone's going to take Crusading Strikes. If you tune it to where it does enough damage to make up for the auto attack plus the other generator that you'd be pressing there, if you tune it to that point, it becomes something you want to spam. In which case they have to create a cooldown for it, which then it becomes a cooldown, right? It's just this whole, you can follow the logic path of how it'll work when they mess with it. And I'm sure that's something that the devs or whatever have come to realize with this ability, is like every time they do something to it, it just kind of like goes in a direction that they might not want it to go. But yeah, either uh, we might see this get removed, honestly, from the game, or the only thing I could see them doing is making it like this very niche thing where it's randomly buffed for a tier, so people play it and have fun with it. I know people have a lot of fun with it. Obviously, the other option would be to get rid of the auto attack thing, which there's a whole portion of the community who loves the auto attack too, believe it or not. If you're watching this, you might be someone who loves the Templar Strikes, but there's a whole portion of the community that loves Crusading Strikes as well. And there's people who are like, you know, maybe they're more casual players, but they're like, well, I'm not using either of them. I'm using regular Crusader Strike because I like Crusader Strike. And, you know, sometimes that's viable too, especially when if Crusading Strike auto attack and Templar Strike's damage is tuned really, really low, then Crusading Strike becomes a much better option because then there's no point of taking this talent because, you know, you barely want to press it anyways, Crusading Strike, and then especially if you can put it into another talent node, which will give you more damage. But the way it is now, right, Crusading Strike auto attack is enough significant point of your damage that you take it. Templar Strikes does not make up for that in any way. Like, so this isn't a perfect way to do it, but I did a little test. I think this is, again, it's not perfect because it doesn't factor in everything, right? And I understand that. But like, if you just count your Crusading Strike DPS, right? So you don't do anything else. Your Crusading Strike DPS, well, I shouldn't say yours. My Crusading Strike DPS was like 77,000, right? That's just from auto attacking the mob and only counting the Crusading Strike auto attack procs. So whereas Templar Strikes, when just pressing this, it's like, oh, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like 110,000, right? Now there's a cooldown between it, so there was time when I wasn't pressing anything, right? Which wouldn't happen normally, but just to kind of like put that in perspective, and that's why I mean when I say it's not perfect. But if you then add any other generator, whether that's Judgment, whether that's Blade of Justice, even Hammer of Wrath, it's going to overtake the DPS that you do from Templar Strikes. In which case, it's like, well, why are we even doing this? And that's counting the Templar Strike dot, the Templar slash dot, and everything. And so, yeah, it just becomes a circular logic of, okay, we'll buff it. Okay, let's spam this button. Okay, we better increase the cooldown so people aren't spamming this button. Okay, now it's like a mini cooldown randomly in our toolkit, and it becomes a cooldown. And what I mean by mini cooldown is like, it's like Divine Toll, it's like Wake of Ashes, it's like Execution Sentence, right? It's now a cooldown, and now it's on a note. There's a choice node between a cooldown and an auto attack, which is kind of weird, right? And so I love Templar Strikes as an idea. I think it was like a really cool way to try to make meleeing feel more cool, because it was supposed to like take place of your melee or make your Crusading Strike feel cool, I guess would be the way to look at it. But yeah, it just never hit because it's either, I mean, you'd have to get rid of auto attack, right? Like that's kind of like the only way I can see to make this work. And again, that would just upset a different part of the community. So I don't know what the solution will be for it going forward. I personally like the little niche things of being like, okay, this tier Templar Strikes is OP. This tier we want to make sure we take improved Blade of Justice so it has 2 charges because it does tons of damage and we just want to sit there and spam it as much as possible. You know, same thing with Judgment. Like, Judgment does as much damage, so take every Judgment talent we possibly can and, you know, double down on Judgment and increase our mastery as high as we can because of High Lord's Judgment, right? Our mastery. So I think niche things like that are cool tier to tier, especially if you just tie it to the tier sets or something like that. But other than that, I'm not sure where the future is going to be for it, honestly. And that's just kind of a breakdown of how it works and why it works that way. And, you know, probably maybe trying to see from the dev's perspective of why it's tuned the way it is. And again, it becomes a circular thing where you almost can't have it be strong without it being overpowered or making the whole talent node worthless anyways. Like nerfing the crap out of Crusading Strikes and Crusader Strike normal to where even a busted version of Templar Strikes becomes a DPS gain. But then it's just a mandatory talent anyways. And so it should just be its own mandatory talent somewhere. So it just becomes a weird thing. So I don't know what the future will be for it. I know this isn't very hopeful if you're a fan of the Templar Strikes thing, but I think the best thing you could hope for is like a niche tier where it's very, very strong and then probably expected to get nerfed after that tier. I think that's probably the best case scenario for it. overall, because if it's ever close with auto attack, that's what I'll recommend using. That's what I'll use. That's what most people will use, because it's just easier and it's one less thing to track. And even if you don't like easy, you know, it's hard to punish yourself when you're not getting any reward for it, basically. And punish is a strong word, but put yourself through a harder time without getting anything out of it. Most people don't do that. It's not human nature. So I wanted to go over that ability again because I hear so much about it. But that'll be it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. If you're already a subscriber, ask you to please check out the Patreon. Join the guild as well on a paladin character, main or alt. And everybody, have a good one.